Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are The Breakfast Club. We got some special guests on the line. We have Erika Alexander, who's been here several times. Welcome back, sister. And we also have Whitney Dow. Good morning, sir.
Thanks for having me.
What's up, Whitney? What's up, Queen Erika? They're here to talk about reparations now or never, the Big Payback Podcast.
Yes, how about that? It's time has come. And we're happy to do it, actually. It's been a really good conversation, but also a great education, not only into the history of America, but also the history of African Americans in America and all the injustices from slavery. It's actually overwhelming.
Well, Erika, I already can hear people talking. I can hear people saying, what makes you and Whitney qualified to discuss reparations?
Yeah, and how did you get this podcast started?
Oh, sure. Okay, we'll do both. I'll answer the second one, Envy. We were working on a documentary, and it was about reparations. And obviously, you start to get some of the stars of reparation, the people that have been pioneers, the people that are in it, and really qualified experts. And then something extraordinary happened. There was an alderwoman in Evanston, Illinois. Her name is Robin Rue Simmons, and she passed the first reparations bill in American history in the 400th year, meaning last year, 2019, or I guess the year before last, and did something that no one had ever done. So they called her the Rosa Parks of reparations, and we started following her. We'd already been trying to follow HR 40 and its sort of turgid move through Congress with Sheila Jackson Lee as she inherited it from John Conyers. But why am I qualified? I'm Black. I'm African American. I think that qualifies me to say a little bit about reparations because I think I'm owed it. Whitney may have his point of view, but I'll just tell you straight. And the other thing is that I think I'm a person who's curious enough to know that this is an important issue, and I wanted to look at it from a greater point of view. And the Black Effect said, yeah, we'll do it. So there you go. And Whitney, why you?
Well, first of all, I'm white, so I guess I'm qualified to pay it, right? So that's the first one, right? But the second thing, I've been making films about race and difference, always with a cross race with partners who are of another race. And the more I started making films and projects about it, I always felt like there was this big conversation left out of what is white people's role in it? I know it's changed a lot in the last few years, but and so as I started digging into it and started really digging into all the different ways that race was impacting the country, I really come to the point where just believe that the racial division in this country is the thing that's driving all the divisions. And the fact that we've never had a reconciliation in this country is driving all the divisions, economic divisions, political divisions, social divisions. And that until we deal with that, we're not going to be able to deal with anything.
Whitney, I wanted to ask you, what made you even get into, with the documentaries that you do, it is a lot about race and Black and white people relationships. What made you even start focusing on that?
Oh, man. To be honest, no white guy sets out, I want to be the white race guy who wants to talk about white supremacy. I swear to God, I swear to Angela, I literally got into documentary filmmaking because I wanted to be a commercial director. And I thought, I need to get a film credit in order to do this. And then the first film I made with my friend, Marco Williams, who's a Black filmmaker. And we did it on, I don't know if you remember the dragging murder of James Byrd Jr. in East Texas, when he was dragged to death by 3 white men in Texas. We made a film called 2 Towns of Jasper. And the experience of making a film about that event with a friend of mine who was a Black American and trying to navigate it so profoundly changed my perception of both my country and myself that there was really, I couldn't go back. I could only go forward. And since then, I've just as you know, once you start getting into this, every question that you have that gets answered with another question, and I keep it going, deeper and deeper into it. And I was lucky enough to be connected to Erika Alexander last year by our friend Joy Reid, and saw that wow, here are these two people who came from so different places, traveled these extraordinary different paths, and landed in this place where we both believe that reparations is the most important issue facing our country.
Now, do you guys think we'll ever see reparations in our lifetime, honestly?
Here's the problem.
Did the computer frozen?
you know what? Here's the problem. For 30 years, they've been trying to have a discussion about reparations, not trying to give it to us. That's what H.R. 40 is. It's named after, famously, the 40 Acres and the Mule. But it's the House of Representation has this bill in front of them, and they can't even bring it in to discuss it. And this is among people who a lot of them want it. So I don't know if we're going to actually get reparations. There have been pockets, but I think that Robert Louis Simmons might have something of a blueprint because people are starting to talk about it locally. So maybe that's the way it comes in.
Can we talk about that blueprint? Because when you hear reparations, everyone has a different opinion on what reparations actually looks like. And I know you guys are exploring that on the podcast. But from your own personal opinions, what do you think is the best way that reparations should happen?
Money. I'm saying cash is king. That's me.
Check
I think
plus.
Check exactly. But by the way, that's the conversation of why. That's why the conversation or discussing it or the analysis and the diagnosis of it is so important, because a lot of people think that it's just about a check or it's only about a check or and that's so crude. It's kind of grotesque. The problem is there's a pain and suffering of all these people. Millions and millions of Africans died, and we denied citizenship. We were denied all sorts of restitution. They did experimentation on us, Tuskegee. They continue to do things, mass incarceration. These are all plagues among us. So should it just be a check? No. Should it be a check? I absolutely believe it should, because I think that money is power. Envy, you talk a lot about real estate. You talk about ownership, and part of owning it, I think, for white people is paying and having an outright payment for it. But there's programs, there's all sorts of things that should come into play. There's the mental and health conversation. There's so many things that are involved that it's going to take, I think, a mass sort of program and really the real experts to come and do it. But I do think that money should be a part of it, because I think that that's how Americans and most people, human beings, weigh value.
I'm afraid to give people just money, though, because if you give people just money with no financial competency, no financial literacy, he's going to give it right back to the white man.
Yeah. Somebody call Killer Mike. He's trying to teach us how to spin it on. Well, Whitney, do you think that you're going to get it right back?
I'm hoping. No.
No.
All right, now we're going to take the N out of your name. We're going to take the N out of your name and start calling you Whitey Dow.
You got to talk faster, sir.
That'd be the first one. But it's something that's, you asked, is it just money? And I think actually, because I taught Erika and I have this, I'm here to save white people too, because I feel that it's not just about the money, but I sort of that's like the baseline responsibility. But I think when you ask, is it going to happen? One of the big things that has to happen, one reason why reparations hasn't happened, it's going to force white Americans to reimagine their own story. And that's the existential threat. That's the threat that to get white people to say, accept their history, accept their legacy of being part of this white supremacist structure. That's why people are storming the Capitol, not because that they're thinking that they think that somehow the election was stolen, but they're being told that, hey, the bills come due. This is the reality of the world. And for someone, I did this project called the Whiteness Project, where I talked to 300 white people about being white. It's an existential threat. To accept that means I'm not who I think I am.
Wow. It's one thing that intrigues me about this podcast, the Big Payback, is Whitney's perspective. So I want to hear from both of y'all. Erika, you start. Why was it important to include the perspective of a white male in this conversation?
Because it's their debt. It's their debt, and it may not be the debt that they say. Oh, I no. So this is the conversation, and that most people say, or they say, I wasn't there. My ancestors did it, but I wasn't there. Why should I pay it? I said, well, you can't say that to the victims of Hiroshima. That, they're deformed babies that come out years and years and years after that bomb was dropped and the original victims are dead, that they're not ongoing disfigurement. And so to me, the disfigured position of African Americans is because of the historical precedent of race and slavery in America. So you talk about redlining, you talk about loans and how it's not only difficult to get a decent loan, but also the discrimination, the prejudice behind it. You talk about the women that go missing all the time and nobody looks for them. They'll launch a huge thing for white women, but not for Black people and Black women. It goes on and on and on, how many disparities that we're, vulnerable to. So it's white people's debt. They should pay it, but it's America's debt. They don't have to worry about paying it. Let the federal government pay it because that's their debt. They're the ones who paid it to the Japanese. They're the ones who started to, now they don't officially call it reparations to the Native Americans, millions of acres of land, billions of dollars. It's their debt, and it's our debt as Americans to make sure that African-American descendants are considered and more properly. I think this huge apology has to do with an acknowledgement that they've done something to a specific population in America.
But who apologizes? Is it their president? Is it, who do we get this apology from?
We've had a couple. Go ahead, Whitney.
There's already been an apology, right? I mean, I think the Senate voted for apology, but they said, let's just be clear. This apology can't be used for reparations. I mean, there's like, it wasn't a true apology, but I do think it's the federal government created the system. The federal government created the structures to like oppress Black people. It's a federal government responsibility to make that better. But I want to answer something that you said, Charlamagne, about why white people. And it's like, it is our debt. And it's like, it's our responsibility to clean it up. It's like when your kids mess up, you make them clean it up, right? Like, it's not like you don't say, oh, well, I'm going to clean it up. And I really feel that it's that until white people acknowledge that, they can't really be whole. They can't be full Americans. They can't be part of this community. So what I really hope that what this podcast does is that I view my role, my job. There's lots of Black voices out there, but I want to create white ears who can hear them. And I feel like sometimes I can be the interpreter, is that how it is. Like white people and Black people speak, they don't hear them. They don't want to hear them. And so they pretend they can't hear them. But, someone like me perhaps can be the interpreter and allow them to come to the project like this, come to the podcast with open minds and hear it differently than if it were just Erika.
Absolutely.
How do you determine who gets reparations? Because I see that argument also going on, and that's an interesting one for me. So who determines that? What if, you're mixed? Like, just so many different things about reparations. So how do you determine that?
Well, I know I gets it. I gets it. I gets it. Now that by the way, if you look at ADOS and some of the leaders in that movement, they believe that it should solely be descendants of African-American slaves. Now, it's hard to determine who that is right now, but I think it's pretty clear. Let me put it to you like this. Obama don't gets it, okay? I don't think Kamala gets it. If you really start to look at where they come from, she might have to ask for restitution from Jamaica, and maybe go to, her mother's East Indian. Obviously, Obama is from Kenya and his mother is Kenyan, but Michelle Obama gets it. Her children gets it because they have the blood of slaves running through them from her side. I think that one of those things that we get hung up on is who gets it. But the truth is, America gets it. Because what happens is that when you start to really compensate African Americans for what's happened, and it goes inside of their community, it lifts all those people. Poor whites are in this conversation partly because of the historical damage done to African Americans. That was also, in a way, uses ammunition against them. If you look at coal mining country and people in the Delta and the Blue Mountains, these types of same sort of games were played with them because they were vulnerable people. Not in the same way, not historically, not genetically, but we shouldn't look. Obviously, Angela Yee, you're mixed. And, somebody might look at Envy and say, look how light he is. He don't get it. But it ain't about his light skin. Yeah, no, I don't think you get it, Envy.
I get it. Yeah, I don't know. She's 50-50, but I'm
100%. Envy's Dominican.
I ain't Dominican.
Erika. He's Afro-Latino.
I ain't Dominican.
Oh, really? No. Well, I don't know if you get it. You might have to, roll some dice, brother. Look, I don't know. But I just believe that it's a conversation about that ultimately means that a lot of these programs are going to go into disadvantaged communities, and that happens because of gentrification, because segregation is really no longer the same way it is. We have an explosion of Black people now moving down south. we got to find the people. But I think that overall we can figure out where to put that money in those programs.
Do we have any of the ADO's voices on the Big Payback?
We're going to. That's our goal. That's our goal.
Yeah,
Erika, you're so. Oh, go ahead, Whitney.
No, I just say, like, actually, you know, we interviewed William Darity, Professor William Darity.
Yeah.
Great book. And it's funny because he is ADOS. He believes, but he's kind of like the patron saint of ADOS. But ADOS, some of the people ADOS get pretty feisty. But what's really interesting about what we said, who gets it, he has all the different structures. He has, like, you know, oh, well, if you were on the census, if you claimed to be a Black American on the census for 10 years previous to the fund, if you can provide a particular document that shows that you descended from Black slaves, he has a real structure for it. And the reality is that it's a legal question, right? It's not just, if you're going to create a program, you're going to have government money, that's a legal structure. What's so fascinating about what the story we're following in Evanston is that's what they're fighting. They did it reverse. They didn't say, should we do it? Let's talk about how to do it. They said, we're doing it. They took 3% tax on legal marijuana. They created this fund, $1 million a year to pay Evanstonian residents reparations. And they're like, we're going to write these checks now to whom? And they're trying to answer all those questions. This woman, Robin Rue Simmons, she's trying to answer those questions now. Who gets it? Why? How? With what expected outcome? And
we all got to do our DNA testing.
Well, they're actually using the redlining as the injury in their first step, is saying, okay, if you lived in the redlining district, you qualify because here's a structure that injured you, and you're going to get money towards your house. You're going to get $25,000 forgivable loan. You can either buy a house, fix up your house. They're trying to build, because their goal is to build build equity in real estate, which as and Black Americans have been really, like, kept from building equity in that way for so long.
You know what? I got to ask you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you were just talking about that, did you see this story about the couple that had a house that they put for sale and the appraisal was so low? They actually had a white couple come in and get that same house appraised, and it appraised for $500,000 more when it was a white couple getting the same exact house. And this just happened.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Sad to say.
Yeah, it's sad to say. I heard about it, and when they said that they always telling Black people, I don't know, MV, do you know in real estate, to take down their pictures so people don't know who lives in the house when you're trying to sell it or when you're trying to get an estimate. I mean, it's a damn shame.
Mm-hmm.
We can't get over for trying to get over. One of the things about maybe taking a genealogy test, though, Angela, is the fact that, of course, it won't show whether we came through the slave market in Alabama. It'll show maybe perhaps what our lineage is in Africa and maybe some of the European inroads. But that's the other thing, is that our history and all our papers and all these things have never been done well. And you need more than Skip Gates to figure that out. I mean, the thing is, this is a conversation that I think mostly is, needs to happen because it needs to happen, but there's no easy fix. It's too messy. I think ultimately they need to give us Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, and half of California, and we'll call it a day.
You know, Aaron Magruder, the great Aaron Magruder, he had a show that he was doing. He's actually still doing it. It's called Black America. And that was the premise of the show. The premise of the show is the United States government gave Black people 3 states for reparations. Yeah, and I can't remember what the states were, but it was like 3 states in the South.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, they gave the Alaskan Natives $962 million, and they granted them 40 million acres of land.
Wow.
And that's for Native peoples up there. So, I mean, there is some historical precedent. I mean, tons when you look at the reservations and those types of things. I'll take land. I think land would be great. You know, people are starting to make all these Black towns and freedom towns and things like that. They're not wanting to go back to Africa. They say, I'm going to make my piece of Wakanda here.
Mm-hmm.
But they shouldn't have to. And if they're going to, the government should pay for those things. So
Can we
put in plumbing?
Erika and Whitney, can we achieve true equality in America without reparations of some form?
I don't think so. Now, I mean, it's because reparations it means repair, right? It repairs the relationship. And I don't think you can have true equality until you acknowledge you're wrong, you repair that relationship. But then it's also the question, Charlamagne, is what is true equality? And sometimes I wonder, sometimes I get to the point, it's like, do you actually need that? Do you just take it? You know what I'm saying? Like, what does that actually mean to achieve true equality?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that we're all colorblind? We have this? It's hard to understand the question. I worked a lot in Haiti, and there was always like, is Haiti going to change? Is Haiti going to change? I'm like, change to what? Jamaica? Like the Bahamas? Like, what do you think have you been to Haiti? Like, what do you want it to be? In some ways, it's a really cool place because it's not it's not totally owned by the cruise industry, and it's kind of this unique spot in the world. So you say so it's hard to know what actually true equality means.
Yeah, I always say I don't even know if we can ever achieve civil rights in this country, because it's not civil rights that I think the problem is. I think it's human rights. They just don't look at black people as humans. So how can we ever deal with the civil aspect of it if we don't even deal with our regular human rights?
Right.
True. Reverend Barber calls this, and we love Reverend Barber. He calls this, or mark this time period, as the third Reconstruction. So I think that means this is the time to rebuild America's foundation as it should have been built since Reconstruction. And he knows that's not possible without looking at the moral and monetary obligation, as he calls it, toward the least of these. And he doesn't just stop at African Americans. He includes poor whites. He includes people of color. He includes this because of the continuation of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign, which talked about fusion politics, uniting marginalized communities. But that recipe includes the advancement and the implementation of reparation toward the descendants of enslaved Africans. And I believe, like climate change, we talk about climate change, it's an urgent call. We need to save the planet for human beings. But I believe this is our last chance to create America for all Americans, not just as it was meant to be, meaning the founders meant it to be for white American men, but as it should be.
Absolutely.
What other voices do we have on the Big Payback?
We have Reverend Barber. We have William Darity. We have, Lord, we have so many.
Edward Baptist. We got
Mark Morrell.
We got Mitch Landreau. We got Sheila Jackson Lee. We've got
Julianne Malveaux, Win Carr.
Malveaux, yes. Katrina, the descendant of the largest slave-owned trading family in the country. So we have
Katrina Brown.
Katrina Brown. Yeah, we have all kinds of people because it's, look, we're all in it. It's a big mix. So
I'd love to hear y'all sit down with Dr. Claude Anderson too.
Okay.
Do you and Whitney bump heads on certain things, but we hear that on the podcast?
Do we bump heads?
Yeah.
Have you met Erika? Have you met Erika Alexander?
That's why I'm asking. I'm like, Erika, I know how passionate you are, so I'll be interested to hear what kind of things you guys bump heads on.
Angela, it's usually about emotion. I get emotional about things. I cry very easily because I realize that there's a lot of anger that I have suppressed about. I'm frustrated. So many people would ask me, am I the angry Black woman? And I used to say no. I used to be offended, and I realized I'm so freaking angry. I don't know what to do. I'm angry a lot of the times. And so it comes out in these conversations. We went downtown New York to do one of our episodes. It's in the first episode, to the slave market, the African slave market. And it's right next to Wall Street. Wall Street has these huge edifices and buildings, and they've been built with these stone and all this. And you've got George Washington looking across at it, and you've got all these things, and then you've got this plaque that they put in a little tree garden, and it's just so. I'm sure dogs pee on it. I realized I had passed that plaque a lot of times and never saw it, and it physically hurt me to realize that this white man, Whitney Dow, it took him just to put my gaze upon it. And once I saw that the thing that built those buildings and those statues over there was not included, and it's a marker, the smallest something that you could just pass by and not notice, it brought up all this rage and this anger. And I wanted to tear down the sign. I was trying to pull it down. Of course, I'm not I try to think about the John Lewis in me. But the truth is, there's a lot of anger and harm and pain that's generationally in my bones. I didn't understand what my mother was talking about when she always talked about white people. She was angry because she couldn't get past their barriers. And she was so deserved. She worked so hard. I always say my parents both were orphans. They had no help. in a familiar way. They had to do it with just bearing down, willfully, determination, try to get education. And she couldn't get a job after she got her master's, one semester's from a doctorate. And she was 50 years old. So I look at Whitney. He's he's a professor from Columbia. He's got a beautiful family. And I don't think he shouldn't have those things. I'm happy for him. I'm also mad that he has those things. I work hard, but it's not hard enough to get past my skin color or gender. Certainly not my skin color. And so, yes, we bump heads because I'd sometimes, I'll be honest, take out on him what I can't take out on the world.
As you should.
Thank you, Whitey Dow.
What are you talking about? I thought you were in my corner, Charlamagne here.
Did you just call him White Dow?
Whitey Dow.
Yes. Do you feel like that I do that, Whitney? Because we argued.
We do argue. We've had, look, Erica and I have been working together for a couple of years. And I think what's interesting about it is that you can have like shared goals with different motivations. And we're trying to get to the same destination. So we're locked in this. We're locked in mission, but we kind of have different missions and we have different roads that we're traveling along it. And, but look, it's complicated because we live in different realities. Even when we're standing in the same place, we live in a different reality. When I'm standing in front of that slave marker and Erika standing in front of the slave marker, we might as well be on different planets and how we're experiencing that moment. And that's complicated. And so, I think that going into it, when I first met Erika, I was like, I was very skeptical. I don't know if I want to work with this woman. She's an actress, movie star, da, da, da. I'm like, this guy, documentary filmmaker, works in a basement. I don't know if this is a good deal. And I said, Erika, I don't know if this is going to work. She said, Whitney, you think I survived in Hollywood for 30 years without knowing how to handle white people like you? Wow. I was like, okay. I was like, I can work with that. I can work with that. And that's what we've been doing. We've been out there swinging on a bunch of projects since then.
This podcast was meant to explore all opinions surrounding reparations, right? And I'm sure some people y'all spoke to may not be for it. How hard is it to not push back on them when that happens? Or do you push back?
Well, I think the thing is that, in the role of like a filmmaker or the role of it, I think it's a little different of what you're trying to do than what if like in the context of like a podcast or anything, is that I always feel like my job is to be the advocate for the person that I'm talking to, meaning not that I agree with them, but represent them accurately. So I talk to a lot of people that I disagree with. I've worked with a lot of white supremacists. I've worked in all kinds of places. And it's always like, I always just want to, and I also feel like it's always like when you're talking to like white supremacists or racists, they always have that thing where like, they feel like if they could just explain it to you clearly and you would just listen, you would understand. And they end up like hanging themselves. So it's not, we don't even need to push back because I feel like the arguments are self-evident.
Also, after Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, white people, to use your word, Charlamagne, were shook. Mm-hmm. They were shook because it took a public lynching like that to change maybe some of their perspective. And after, you film, the white terrorist acts, again, it's coming in their live feeds every day. They're seeing these things. They're shook with the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's a plague. And it made it plain the caste system that exists and the social disparities that intellectuals and reparation advocates have been talking about and fighting for all this time. And we're talking about people like Queen Mother Moore and Callie House and Frederick Douglass. I mean, we've been having this conversation since Reconstruction, but that's why it matters. I mean, we really need for this convergence of this plague and this pandemic and this George Floyd and Trump, that racist administration created like a race and poverty tsunami. And so we have this conversation that's washing past the shores of polite conversation. It's into the homes of every American, black, white, red, white, and blue. And it's there to deliver a living example of this hypothetical discussion. And we need it because, again, to your point, I don't think we'll ever be whole unless we absolutely deal with it. I think it's karmic. I think we must deal with it.
You said something just now that, you said something earlier and it made me think, like, I often wonder about that when it comes to reparations. When you have this discussion about reparations, or when you was talking about the George Floyd and the Ahmaud Arbery stuff, like you're trying to get people to atone for something they didn't witness. I wonder if folks could see what slavery was and how that trauma from slavery still exists today. Would it be easier to convince them why they need to pay up?
Well, I think it's all around you. You can see it if you're white, and this is the thing. I feel like, I hate the term woke, but you have this certain. I've sort of had certain experiences by working with Erika, working with other people, doing things where it's like if you're a white person and you get the red pill, where you suddenly see the racial dynamics, that your whiteness is this active dynamic component that's driving every moment of every day. And if most white people don't, they think it's this passive thing. And once you see how it's actually working in a moment-to-moment level, and that you actually can control it, it's really, really transformational. So, I don't know. It is such a complicated subject, and it's so hard for, I think, to bring white people into it in this true. But you asked, earlier about can we get there? I think we have to get there. I think we have to get there if we're going to survive as a country. We were talking to Cam Howard, who's one of the co-founders of Cobra. And Cobra, and he said, look, white people have to decide they're going to rise with black people or fall with black people, and that really resonated with me. That is that's where we are right now. Are we going to rise with black Americans? Are we going to rise together, or are we going to fall together?
Well, the big pay.
And they can see it. They can see it. By the way, it's all around them. They saw it in George Floyd's eyes as the light went out in his eyes. That's evil. Mm-hmm. That's their issue. And a white man thought with impunity that no one would hold him accountable, right, because he'd been told that story for all these years. That right there is partly what reparations is there to do, but also partly what this plague that has blanketed this country has lifted the cataracts over their eyes and given them 20/20 vision in the year of 2020.
And on sort of like a positive note there on that, think about how far the conversation has come in, say, the last decade. I always equate it to kind of a gay marriage. Like when I was, the idea of gay marriage wasn't even a thing. It wasn't a thing. And all of a sudden it was this thing that went that. And at a certain point, the conversation where boom, it was done. And I feel in some ways what happened over the last year after the George Floyd killing is when I started working on this stuff, if you said the words white supremacy in front of white people, they do a backflip. Now you open up the paper and there's these articles on the paper talking about the structures of white supremacy, how it's impacting. So things have changed. How far has that needle gotten so that white people actually accept that they're living inside this structure? But I do think that we're much farther down the pike than we were even 2 years ago.
Yeah, we should all turn gay and be black and probably get this done.
Well, the Big Payback Podcast, check it out right now. Erika,
That's right.
Alexander,
Listen,
Whitney Dow, thank you for joining us this morning.
The Big Payback, Reparations Now or Never. It's available on the Black Effect iHeartRadio Podcast Network. Available everywhere you listen to podcasts now. And this podcast, this type of storytelling is exactly what I created the Black Effect Podcast Network for, and I feel privileged to have you, Erika, and you, Whitney, as partners. And I'm blessed to be able to.
Thank you for believing in us and committing to the journey. And thank you and congratulations to y'all for being in the Hall of Fame.
Hey.
Killer.
All right,
thank you, Erika.
So much.
Thank you guys.
Whitney Dow,
Thank you, Whitney.
Black Effect.
All right, peace.
Bye.